confirmation of the agenda. Deputy Reeve Campbell, Councillor Syke, all in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, if any. None noted. Moving to the consent agenda, and further that any point in the consent agenda, if the councillor wants to pull that for special attention, they may do that now. Councillor Syke.
I just wanted to question about 4.3.2, which is the increase in operating grant for the daycare. I just wasn't sure whether it was annual or one time. One time? Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else?
I'll move the approval of the agenda.
Okay.
Consent agenda.
Consent. Seconder? Councillor Hallahan? All in favor? Oh,
Sorry.
all in favor? Yeah. Carried. Okay. That moves us to 5.1. And a number of people from the House and Dam Committee. Dave Shaw's name is listed first. Are you going to act as sort of chair for the group, or do you want me to announce who all is in the group?
You please do that.
Okay. There's Dave Shaw, Ken Wood, Sinclair Wardrop, Doyle Cullen, Andy McBride. And so that I will turn it over to you to start the presentation, Dave.
Thank you. May I stand?
Certainly, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say what a pleasure and a privilege it is to stand before Reeve, council, staff, press, to lead off the presentations that we have for the House and Dam today. No bells, no whistles from me, just some talk from the past. And I feel it's very important not to live in the past, dwell in the past, but to be cognizant of the past. And I think that's what we'll start off with today for my 4 minutes. 45 years ago, right this spring, we got out the map and we found Wingham on the map because we were coming here for the very first time for my wife to have an interview with the gentleman behind me for Effie Medill 45 years ago. We had that interview and then we went around the town and we looked. And the most impressive thing that we saw in this town by far was the dam above and below our dam. Above and below. So we thought, wow, you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. And wow, what a great first impression we had of Wingham because of what we saw here. Beautiful, magnificent, charming, whatever those words to describe, that's what we saw. We took that home back to Peterborough with us, and we look forward to coming here. And for the first 2 years, we rented on the main street and had a ball on this part of the river. We fished, we boated, and enjoyed many hours on our river. 2 years after that, we spoke to a realtor and he sold us our house 500 meters from our dam. Our beautiful dam with water below and water above. And you know what one of his selling points was? The previous owner loved to come after a stressful day of work and go down and swim at the Wingham Dam. That was one of the selling points of us 45 years ago. We didn't do that, but boy, we went and we canoed and we fished and we boated and we had all kinds of time on the river with hundreds of other people, bordering thousands of other people, fishing, recreating, canoeing, just enjoying the dam down there. And we had that chance to be there with them for all those years. Now I say to you, we saw wildlife. Scared the living daylights out of me by a big beaver down there, big snapping turtles, beautiful fishing, salmon, rainbow trout, other kinds of fishing, bass, and ducks, geese, osprey, and nothing quite dramatic as seeing that osprey come above the dam and dive about 30 meters down and pick something out of the water right there. We saw that many, many times in our beautiful setting. However, over the years, the structure began to crumble and it was painted all over grossly with graffiti, and nothing was ever done about it. I spent a lot of time down there watching this thing deteriorate right in front of my eyes. No more excellent impressions, first impressions of this town by going down there. No more. As a matter of fact, anyone using this coming here for the first time would have a terrible impression of Wingham and North Huron, whereas we had a phenomenally excellent first impression. And now I believe, it's my personal thought, that it's an embarrassment to our town, to North Huron, and to anybody who goes through over the Hannah Bridge and looks right or left and looks up and down. Lorna would say to Harvey, what has happened to this place? A rhetorical question. What has happened here in Wingham? Those people, whether from town or passing through the bridge, would look up, down and say, what a mess. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. I ask you to start the process immediately to regain the beautiful setting that we once had in this town of Wingham, in North Huron, and restore this as your legacy. Thank you very much for being allowed to address you. And Reeve?
Ken?
Echo Dave's comments and given the privilege of being here. News bulletin. A young Toronto woman is dead following a canoe accident on Lake Couchiching. The OPP were called to the lake around noon on Sunday, May the 20th, after a canoe with 2 people overturned at about 100 meters from shore. One of the occupants, a 25-year-old woman from North York, was brought to an Aurelia hospital where she was pronounced dead. The second woman was cleared by the scene by paramedics. The name of the victim is being withheld until the family has been notified and postmortem is completed. Police say the women were not wearing life jackets. And their comment is, residents are reminded to wear life jackets at all times when on the water. You're probably wondering when I talk about this as the upper pond. I remember, as Dave does, that I've been here long enough to know about the lower dam, the lower pond, the upper dam, the upper pond. The reason for the story I gave you is because these 2 people were not fortunate enough to grow up here and attend F.E. Medill Secondary School, where the phys ed classes for years took water and canoe safety on the upper pond. These students in the situation I quoted would have had life jackets and survived that ordeal. All the students who took part in that program not only are more safety conscious themselves, but we are not able to know how many other people they may have given that knowledge to in their work careers. I think we can all agree on the aesthetic value of the upper pond, but we really have to consider the practical safety value it has produced over the years, how it must have water level for that program to prevail. Thank you.
Sinclair?
Thank you for having us here. Like Dave and Ken, I came to Wingham 50 years ago when F.E. Medill hired me, so that gives me some street cred right there. What Dave and Ken said really covers what I never intended to speak on, because most of you already know that. But I remember the whole 50 years I've been here being very worthwhile, and I'm still here. What concerns me now is, and it concerns a lot of people in Wingham, and you can tell by the attendance at council meetings and various things that go on in Wingham, particularly the dam and pond, that there's a great interest in it. And where there's an interest, there are people who are willing to spend their money to make it not the eyesore that it is now, and the dam thing. We're not alone in this struggle to preserve heritage. And in some places, I believe 10 I found online in local watersheds, particularly Millbrook, which spent $2.3 million. And their dam actually belongs to the Conservation Authority. It did once belong to the town, but the town got all tangled up in the finance as far as the gentleman I spoke to from there. We taught together once in Stony Creek, so I know who he is. He said that you have to drive these things, not let them just get rid of heritage. And it's important. And we're trying to hire doctors. We're trying to get people to come here to be part of our town. They come here because of some of the businesses and industries here. And an eyesore isn't a good thing to have. And there are ways of paying for these things. There are funds available for some of the other groups. There's a dam in Exeter that's been repaired. There's the one in up in the Saugeen further up towards Hanover. It's been repaired. So it can be done. We just need the foresight and the drive to do it. And I've always appreciated living here. I really don't have to live here. It's just me since my wife died. So, but I choose to live here. And I'd like it to be the way it can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Doyle?
Good evening, council and friends. 6 years ago, actually 64 years, almost 65 years ago, I was born here in Wingham Hospital. 60 some years ago, I lived on Minnie Street, and the family took the evening walk down to the dam. I still remember that as a little wee guy. Life is kind of a cycle, and my wife and I were looking for a place to live, and we chose Wingham because of its wonderful recreational facilities. A pool, a Y, and a beautiful river that, having a love for the water, I can take our little boat and launch within 5 minutes and have a wonderful road for cardiovascular benefits, and also my wife just reveling in the beauty of the nature that was there. The water lilies, the waterfowl, the beaver, the muskrats, the gamut. My point, we don't have that facility right now. On Saturday evening, I had to go approximately a half hour away to enjoy family recreation using the boat. But it is more than just ourselves that is concerned here. We live over at 295 Center Street, just back behind the post office there, and just right around us, there's at least 10 young people. And the past summer, not this summer, but the past summer, they would get together, grab their tackle boxes and their fishing poles, and they would head on down to the dam because it was a wonderful spot to fish, swim, get together. They were doing a nice, using their energy in a good way. They don't have that this summer. And they are inquiring. Are the boards going to go back in the dam? Are they going to fix the dam? I just want to bring those concerns to you because that's the local neighborhood kids. they would like to have a recreation facility.
Thank you, Doyle. Andy?
Reeve Neal, council members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Citizens Committee. We represent over 1,000 people, some of whom are here this evening. And as you've heard, they have indicated to you and to us that they wish to retain the lovely pond that has been enjoyed and well used by the residents of Wingham and area for over 100 years. Of course, that pond is created by the house and dam. We have mentioned to you before that we've been meeting for 6.5 years, and at one point we were making good progress toward a repair project with the assistance of your staff members, I should say former staff members, Mrs. Newsom and Mr. Church. We would very much like to work with you to find a solution to this problem. A solution that will benefit everyone and not leave an unsightly scar across the north end of town, similar to what took place with the lower pond area. Accordingly, of the options suggested in the KGS report, we favor rehabilitation, or if necessary, replacement. We all know that the present dam has been subjected to the elements for almost 100 years, and it's not seen any significant repair work for about 30 years, even though there was $195,000 sitting in a reserve account specifically for maintenance and repair of the dam, and that was in February 2012. So it's not a surprise that KGS found that the portion of the dam above the ground is in poor condition. It's been subjected to freeze thaw for almost 100 years. Unfortunately, most of that reserve money I mentioned is now being spent on engineering studies. However, we do not understand how KGS can state that the dam is unstable when, firstly, they did not investigate the foundation, and secondly, the dam has withstood 2 significant flood events, one in the order of a 1 in 100 year storm, or flow in the past year, that being the one in June last year. And one of those was with some stop logs in the North Spillway. We also don't understand why KGS determined the hazard potential of the dam to be high when on page 26 of their safety assessment report, they state, and I quote exactly, engineering judgments suggest that the effects of the dam breach are minimal in the populated areas of town, and that it is unlikely that loss of life would be attributed to the dam breach. This finding would lead to the selection of a low hazard potential classification, end quotes. However, they assigned a high hazard to it. We also question why the newer North Spillway and the earth embankment between the old and new sections of the dam were not included in the KGS study. It seems that important elements were left out. We note that in 2 places in the stability assessment report, KGS mentions that, again I quote, the dam was originally built to prevent flooding and to create a reservoir for recreational use. I expect that most of you know, but we certainly dispute this assertion because our research indicates that the original dam that was built in or before 1862, that's 156 years ago, and all the subsequent dams were constructed to provide water power for various types of mills. As an aside, it's interesting to note that in recent years, the site has been considered by a private company for the generation of electricity. One of your former staff was quite interested in as well. Conservation Authority suggests that removal of the dam will reduce the potential of upstream flooding, but they have not provided any proof of this in the way of revised floodplain mapping. Furthermore, the Conservation Authority owns at least 3 dams, and as far as we know, it is not moving to remove any of them. The Ontario Rivers Alliance suggests that the river should be returned to its natural state. But we ask you, what is the natural state when a dam has existed at this location for over 150 years? It's our suggestion that council not make any quick rash decisions on the future of the Howson Dam and Pond without full and complete input of the public. Of course, we do not want to see considerable municipal tax dollars directed to this, but we believe there will be both federal and provincial infrastructure programs that can be accessed for funding. And who knows, as Sinclair said, perhaps some private money may also be available. And also, as Sinclair said, we have been researching other communities that have been able to rehabilitate their dams, such as Delhi, Mitchell, Port Dover, Ayr, Millbrook, and Cambridge. So we ask you to consider these presentations, and thank you for doing so.
Thank you. Do many council members have questions of those presenting? Okay. Thank you. We will move to 5.2. Linda Heron, Chair of Ontario Rivers Alliance, is going to make a presentation now. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Reed Vincent and council members, press. And also I acknowledge the Save the Dam people. I empathize with you. I live on a river, so I do empathize. I wanted to tell you first a little bit about Ontario Rivers Alliance. We're a not-for-profit grassroots organization, and we have a mission to protect, conserve, and restore Ontario rivers. We created Ontario Rivers Alliance to create a strong, united voice. We use a big picture perspective. We look at, all across the province. And also the Great Lakes. We're very interested in improving the Great Lakes water quality. We collaborate, we build alliances, we share information with groups and members. We strategize and we share our tools. We also do a lot of commenting on policy and legislation because we feel that's the best way to make meaningful change in Ontario. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of our successes. We started Ontario Rivers Alliance around 87 hydroelectric projects that were proposed in 2011. And we addressed altogether 26 of those projects, and we stopped 24 proposed hydroelectric dams on 12 river systems. Just move to the next one here. Sorry. We also, last year, we partnered with the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Credit Valley Conservation Authority in the Rudd Dam Removal Project. It's a brook trout habitat, and so it was over 100-year dam, and we removed that in October of last year. The Springbank Dam, you probably heard the controversy over the Springbank Dam on the Thames River. We started campaigning on that 3 years ago, and when we started, the mayor had run on repairing that dam, and they hadn't even considered decommissioning it. At the end of the campaign, just last January, they had a unanimous decision to decommission the dam. So that was quite the accomplishment. We're successful in getting amendments to the Class EA for water power to get definitions of run of river, peaking, sustainability. They were all things that were left out of the Class EA for water power. We also had intervenor status in the Energy East pipeline application, and we're currently advocating for several dams that are no longer serving a useful purpose or that are unsafe in Ontario. I wanted to talk about climate change because, that is really the issue of our times, the challenge of our times. We are facing a future of climate uncertainty, and with an increasing frequency and magnitude of extreme rain events, as you experienced last June. Less snow and more rain in the winter months. Each degree of temperature rise can increase air's water capacity by 7%. And a Toronto climate model predicts over the next 30 years that there will be an average temperature increase of 5.7 degrees Celsius and an average summer temperature increase of 3.8 degrees Celsius. So it's crucial that municipalities ensure that climate change is taken into account in all infrastructure projects. You only have to look to South Carolina. In 2015, there were 18 dams that failed, and there were 16 deaths when that happened. Failure of an upstream dam can lead to cascading failure of downstream infrastructure. And we really have to look beyond the 1 in 100 year flood to a 1 in 1,000 year flood. And KGS Group failed to consider climate change. It wasn't even mentioned in their report. But the dam's viability, they need to consider climate change and dam's viability or repair and rehabilitation. The next slide, well, of course, you all know what that is, but it was Howson Dam at capacity last June. 411 cubic meters per second. It was at the Water Survey of Canada gauge, and the 1 in 100 year flood is 442 cubic meters per second. The next one is looking downstream, and what will this look like if it's rebuilt or rehabilitated in 5 years or 10 years or 50 years, because these dams last, when they're rebuilt, approximately 100 years. The next slide is just to show the Gauri Dam failure upstream, and that's the scour hole that was left behind. It was 175 millimeters of rain that fell in 7 hours, and 150 families were put at risk when the earthen dam was breached. And this is in 1974, the Gauri Dam failure. Again, the earthen portion of the dam washed out. And this is the Melville Dam on the Credit River. And in that same storm, it breached as well. It was the earthen portion of the dam that washed out. So I thought the best way to approach it would be to talk about the implications and benefits of the different options or the pros and cons. So to decommission the dam, it's $436,000 estimated, and the benefits of decommissioning, this is the most affordable option by far, both in the short term, but especially in the long term. It will provide improvements to water quality and temperature, aquatic habitat, riverine health, sediment transport, the fishery, tourism, and connectivity. It would open up a large section of the river for boating and fishing. It increases resilience to climate change. That's a very important one. It closely aligns with the Township of North Huron's strategic plan, meeting fiscal, safety, and environmental objectives. There will be no future operation maintenance required or associated costs, and it reduces the risk of upstream and downstream flooding. Public life and property loss would be significantly reduced. And safety would be addressed. The township's short and long-term liability would be significantly reduced. It would create a healthy and safe natural environment. Sediment and nutrients can freely move downstream year-round. It would reinstate natural processes, create a cooler and deeper natural channel, improve habitat for species at risk in the fishery. It would open up fish passage, create a park vista, an opportunity to extend and improve the Wingham Flats Ecological Park. All regulators and agencies would be in full support of naturalization of the river. Funding is available for habitat restoration and improving conditions for species at risk. ORA is aware of 3 provincial and 5 federal government sources that can provide from $20,000 to an unlimited amount for habitat restoration. In addition, there are other private funding sources, and ORA and other key partners would be happy to assist in the funding portion of that. We were funding partners on the Red Dam removal, and we have another project that we're working on, the Ainsworth Dam on the West Credit River, that we're funding partners on. I do have a list of funding sources. The housing dam, you can see in this picture. I don't have to show you that picture because I know you all know that it's crumbling, and it's, I think somebody said it's not just an eyesore, but it's unsafe. And the KGS geotechnical report indicated it was not suitable for rehabilitation. So I'll start with the implications and benefits of rehabilitation. The estimated cost is between $2.869 million and $4.581 million to rehabilitate it. Rehabilitation would extend the life, but it would not match the design life of a rebuilt structure. KGS Group rated the house and dam as having a high hazard potential and reported that the concrete is not suitable for repairs or rehabilitation. Most sections of all 3 cores were rubble or heavily fractured. Intact core samples couldn't be retrieved over most of the core length. The pros and cons of dam replacement: a new dam, a new concrete overflow weir, it would be $6.2 million. KGS Group did not, though, consider life cycle costs in their estimate. And this is unusual, as life cycle costs are an essential consideration when you're comparing the true cost of all of the alternatives. Constrained budgets sometimes make it tempting to only think short term, but comparisons and long-term decision-making must include life cycle costs. And a life cycle cost assessment takes into account ongoing dam operation, maintenance and capital costs, risk of liability, end-of-life costs, so the retirement of the dam eventually. The Riverside Dam, estimated at $5.4 million, and the Riverside Dam is huge, and it's $5.4 million estimated to build a new dam. It had life cycle costs at $30,000 a year for its expected life of 100 years. So conservatively speaking, the house and dam at $6.2 million would have life cycle costs of about $3.5 million. And for infrastructure planning, it's usually recommended to allow for 1 to 2% per year for life cycle costs. So that, $3.5 million is very conservative. Also, next slide. You have the uncertainty of increasing climate effects over the next 10, 15, 50 years. The 1 in 100 year flood return is insufficient. Really need to think more in the terms of 1 in 1,000 year. It gives an increased risk of flooding and dam failure. Risks will increase over the dam's life. Public safety is at risk, loss of life and property over the short and long term. You have liability issues, degraded water quality, financing costs, escalating costs, and a huge burden on taxpayers. The benefits, it could last 100 years under normal conditions, but we aren't really looking at normal conditions over the, the next several years as far as, climate change goes. You have a seasonal recreational reservoir, tourism, that's all I could think of. And the benefit of looking out at a reservoir or a pond, I suppose. So the visual. In closing, the financial, environmental, safety, and liability aspects of the three choices clearly favor decommissioning of the dam. And I acknowledge the powerful community force here lobbying to repair or rebuild the dam. However, ORA requests that council place public safety, fiscal responsibility, and landscape scale ecological integrity first and do what's best for the whole. And I want to thank the Rehabilitation Council for giving me this opportunity to present. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any counselors that have questions for Linda? Councillor Sight?
Linda, under naturalization, what in your experience about naturalization, what water level would the Maitland end up going to? Like, how high would the Maitland water go up from its current situation today?
I don't know what the current situation is on the Maitland,
but based on what you're stating in your presentation, water levels would rise. That's what I got from your presentation.
with extreme rain events, yes. When with climate change, that is the prediction that these extreme rain events will increase in frequency and in velocity. And so the stop logs that I just heard, there were a few that didn't come out of the house and dam when you had that big flood last June. But it's a dangerous job taking those stop logs out. And if you couldn't get in and remove those, that would back that river up and create a lot of flooding and the potential of taking the dam out. Because a lot of these dams can't withstand the power of water when you have these extreme rain events. And the one that we had last June was not quite at the 100-year storm. And they're, like I said, we really need to be preparing for a 1 in 1,000 year storm with climate change and building resiliency into all of our infrastructure. But it's also important that you consider the life cycle costs. A big gap that I saw in the report by KGS. Did I answer your question?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Well, it would be the natural river levels that when all your stop logs are out, that would be your natural level. But what happens too, and oftentimes the channel gets deeper, a lot of more sediment moves downstream. So, that is one of the possibilities if it were naturalized, that you would have a deeper channel. But it also has a lot of other benefits as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to
I'm sorry, to interrupt.
no, not during the council meeting. At any other time, the council meeting is for the council and staff to evaluate, and we hear the presentations and we have to evaluate the presentations. But the council meeting is for the council, and that by all means, please contact any of the council members, all the council members at your pleasure. Our contact information is on the township website. And that, so that council definitely wants to have all the information they can and all the options available to make a decision. Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to consent app 6.11, consent application report file. Laura, can you take over?
Good evening, Councilor Reed. So tonight I'm discussing consent application C20-18 with you. It's an application with the applicant David Murray and the owner Skilder Farms Inc. So it's for a farm property on Moncrief Road in East Wabinosh, and the purpose of this application is a surplus severance. So you can see on this aerial here, the farm with the proposed severed land that contains the house and several accessory buildings, including 2 sheds and a barn. And the proposed retained land. The entire property is currently zoned AG1 general agriculture, as well as designated agricultural in the official plan. The area that's proposed to be severed is approximately 3 acres, and the area to be retained is approximately 97 acres. Comments received during the circulation of the consent application from the health unit indicated that the applicant submitted septic inspection certificate was sufficient, and the health unit did not require any recommended conditions or concerns with this application. There were no comments received or concerns from any other staff members or the public during the circulation. So you can see here the approximate 3 acres of the proposed severed area with the house and the several buildings. Site inspection with the property owner did indicate that the accessory buildings are all in excellent condition for storage purposes, and would be used for storage purposes by the new owner of the AG4 property. Here is a property or a picture showing from Moncrief Road. You can see the house there as well as the treed lane and the lawn that would be proposed to go with the house. And here is one of the accessory buildings that are on there currently, and the house itself there. The surplus dwelling criteria policies in the North Huron official plan were reviewed against this application. It was found to meet the criteria. The house is surplus to the needs of the farmer, and the house was built over 15 years ago. There are no barns remaining on the retained farmlands for any MDS concerns, and as well, the retained lands are satisfying the minimum size requirement for retained farmlands in the surplus severance. And this as well as the additional shed that would be proposed to go with the AG4 land. So I'm recommending that council recommend approval for this with the included conditions, which are standard for a surplus dwelling severance, including a survey to be completed, the cash in lieu fee, and as well the automatic rezoning for the severed house parcel to be rezoned AG4-9 automatically, and the retained farmlands to be rezoned AG2, which will permit the general agricultural use, but restrict a future house on that property. Thank you.
Deputy Reeve?
Does the landowner, the farmer, have another excess off the property other than the land that goes down?
Yes, they do.
Any other comments? Councillor
I have no
Halligan,
comments, I made the motion.
you're gonna move,
Yes.
and Councillor Knott is seconding. Okay, further discussion, if any? Call the question. Those in favor of the motion? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay. Moving to 6.1.2, the municipal cell phone contract renewal. I'll let Richard explain that.
Thank you, Vincent. So the employee cell phones that North Huron currently has, the plan is with TELUS. That plan came up for renewal earlier this year, and since that time, we've been working with providers looking at available packages and options for that renewal. And the recommendation with this report is to renew with TELUS due to the reduction in fees that they have offered in conjunction with the renewal bonus credits. So it's estimated that the monthly cost will be reduced by around $510, and TELUS has also offered $3,700 in bonus credits. So that includes changes to the plan itself, lower rates, also a few less phones due to staff changes and things like that. So, and it also includes a reduction to the fees associated with the fleet trackers that the Public Works Department uses as well. And so the new plan would also be on a three-year renewal. And if council supports this renewal, there is a bylaw later in the meeting to sign the agreement.
Councillor Syke,
I'll move it.
Councillor Knott,
I'll second, but I do have a question.
go ahead.
Through yourself to Richard, within that 3-year contract, is a provision for if we needed more phones?
Certainly, yeah.
At the same price?
Yeah, so we can add new phones anytime. It would just be, there would be a fee to break the contract, that's all. And so if you added a new phone 6 months from now, then they wouldn't be on the same schedule. You wouldn't be signing up for 2 years and 6 months. You'd be signing up for a 3-year term again. So some of them would be not aligned, but it happens.
That's sufficient. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, moving to 6.2.1, the Pitney Bowes postage machine contract. Donna?
Yes, thank you, Reeve. So the last time that we purchased a postage machine, we actually did put out the capital dollars, and that was in 2009. So it's held up fairly well all these years, but it is at the end of its life. And at this point, with all the changing technology, we felt that even though I personally am not really used to recommending the lease to you folks, that in this particular case, that I do believe the lease option is the way to go with all the e-billing and all the new ways that we're trying to send out our bills without actually taking them to the post office. So Richard was a huge asset in this, in speaking with the companies and getting the prices and going over all the technical parts of the contracts. And so we've come up with that the best price would be to transfer over to Pitney Bowes, and the total monthly cost would be $163.50. We do have the annual lease amount in our 2018 budget. And so we would like to get moving on this as quickly as possible because the current contract expires with Neo Post on June 26th. So, excuse me, as also there is a bylaw further on in the bylaw section if council will approve this report to move forward. Any questions?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, and Councillor Gladden seconds. Yeah, Councillor Knott.
Question, I guess, because Richard was doing this Did you look into online with the post office? What their provisions are?
We have a Canada Post account for things like mass mailings, such as like the election and things like that. But we didn't look specifically for this sort of use that. To answer your question.
Because my understanding is that they are now going to provide, and I haven't read them, I get all their stuff because I have a post office account, that there are provisions to do online printing and postage. So I would recommend before you go ahead with this, that perhaps you just make an inquiry just to find out if that can be, because there was, the little bit I read, offered a service, if it's a similar service for virtually no charge, so I think it's worth looking at before you proceed to execute the contract.
Uh,
We make that a proviso.
Donna, I'm going back to you over the 26th of June as the ending of our current
Right.
contract. So do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just that we're under such a deadline since our budget was passed so late this year. So we can definitely check into that and see what information we could find. But we would like to be able to, if that isn't a lucrative option for us, we would like to be able to move forward quickly on this proposal that we have here tonight. We only have a few days left until we'll be using stamps.
That should not be a problem. The post office is very quick in responding to any questions I had.
Good.
Commercial mailing, so.
We do have a motion on the floor though. And so that, does that make it conditional on what we find out very quickly? And that should we have a motion to proceed with whichever option is deemed better by staff?
As seconder, I agree to that.
Okay. You can do the wordsmithing on that?
Sure.
Okay. Is there any further comment? All in favor of the motion? Okay, thank you. Moving to 6.3.1, it's a fitness equipment purchase, and I'll let Kim give further information on that.
Thank you, Reed. So here tonight to get authorization for the fitness staff to proceed with the purchase of a treadmill and also authorize the disposal of the current treadmill under Gov Deals. So the original Life Fitness treadmills were purchased 17 years ago when the fitness center opened, and they have long lived their life expectancy, which was 10 years. So we're unable to get a lot of replacement parts for the current treadmill due to the age of it. So the fitness center is replesting that the Life Fitness treadmills be replaced with Life Fitness treadmills due to their reputation, durability, and reliability, and a good industry standard that they show as well. Plus, the township has had excellent experience with them over the last few years. Parts are simple and they're affordable and easy to acquire. Our members are used to the Life Fitness treadmills, and so they will be very familiar with the working of the new treadmill that we propose to replace it with. There is only one exclusive dealer of Life Fitness treadmills in Ontario, and for that reason, the negotiated method of purchase needs to be put into effect. The $10,000 has been approved in the current budget, the 2018 budget, to purchase a replacement treadmill, and the current cost that we're looking at is about $8,000. The other thing is the disposal of the current treadmill, and we are recommending that we use Gov Deals for that, and the proceeds be put into reserves for future fitness equipment purchases.
Councillor Sight?
I'll move.
Councillor Ritzman Toninga seconds. Is there any further discussion or any questions for Kim? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, moving to 6.4.1, it's roadside mower procurement, and I'll let Sean fill you in on further details.
Thank you, Reeve. This council's likely aware, this was one of the items that we discussed during budget deliberations. Essential for roadside maintenance or roadside mowing maintenance in the rural areas. In keeping with the procurement policy, we released a tender and had four, well, in putting the tender out, we had a very specific spec. We knew that we wanted a front-mounted mower for a number of operational reasons, not the least of which was the ability of the operator to easily see what he was coming into. The hope behind that was that we would preserve the equipment. And also there was obvious ergonomic benefit to the front-mounted unit. So we spec'd the one that was suitable for our specific piece of equipment and put the tender out. We had 4 responses. Very happy to note that all of the responses were very close, which brings a degree of comfort to the process. The cheapest price or lowest price received was Colvoy equipment at $23,743 52 cents. All of the companies quoted comparable equipment, and there was no bid irregularities. So our recommendation would be, obviously, in this case, that we go with Colvoy equipment for the unit. It's important to note that this came in under budget. We had a total of $25,000 budgeted. The price with adjusted taxes comes in at actually $24,161 and 41 cents.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hallahan moving. Deputy Reeve Campbell seconding. Councillor Sutton.
Sean, is there a warranty provision on the piece of equipment? Is it a year, 5 years, 6 months, 6 weeks?
To be honest, I'm not sure what the warranty is on it because it's a fairly high wear unit. I can look into that and respond, but I won't be a very long one.
Okay.
Because of the nature of the
Because of the
machine.
nature of the unit, yeah, it's extremely high wear.
Councillor Knott.
For yourself, Sean, where is Colvoy equipment located?
I'm not sure exactly where. I'd have to look that up. They're fairly local anyways. We tried to keep it in the area if at all possible.
That was actually my concern, was that for the difference of a couple of $100, I would have liked to have seen us use the most local supplier. And from a service aspect, that would probably be a better choice too. So that's why I'm asking. Who out of all these, I know Roberts is right in our backyard. Can't remember where total equipment space is. But is this one? What's that?
Total's out of Elmira.
Is it Elmira? That's the closest one. You probably either down. No, not the seafront. Anyway, I just question the choice. To me, would be whoever is closest that can provide service for this equipment, that we buy it from them. And if
Sorry, through you to read it. Their address is Brantford. They're based out of Brantford.
oh, well, then right off, then I see 2 that are in Metal Plus I've never even heard of. But I see 2 in here that are much closer, and not only are they closer, they employ local people. And my recommendation, or request would be that we purchase it from somebody a little more local, regardless of the $500 perhaps difference in price, which is all it is. We are not obligated to take the lowest necessary contract as part of our bid process. Yeah, it's been part of our bid process. They're not obligated to take the lowest.
Sean.
Yes, Reeve, in response to that, our existing procurement policy speaks to that. But, just for information, but it requires all to be equal. So basically the tiebreaker in an equal price would be the the
If
logo.
I'm not mistaken, the last time I looked at our code, unless we've changed it again, we were not required to take the lowest possible bid. So I'm going to dispute that. And ask that we investigate, because as far as I'm concerned, we buy something from Brantford when we have somebody right down the road that employs local people. In fact, there's a guy down the street from me who works for Roberts Farm Equipment. I would rather see this council take that bid than buy it from them.
Okay, I'm going to Councillor Sight.
Part of the reason for my question about warranty would be how often would this piece of equipment be going back for service, or would we be asking service to come up here? Like, how often are we talking about? Like, would we be doing the service in-house, or would we be actually requiring them to come up here to do this service, and what cost would those be to do that?
Through you, depends entirely on circumstance. I know with our existing piece of equipment, there was a great deal of maintenance done in-house. The last failure was somewhat catastrophic in nature, so we did definitely have to take it out, have it repaired, took it to a local shop, and at that point it was deemed as not economically viable. But they do take a fair bit of abuse, so depending on the operator and the circumstances, you can get into some repair situations.
Councillor
My
John.
recollection is that we're obliged to take the lowest bid unless there's a very substantial reason for not doing so. It seems to me that there are provincial regulations on this in the municipal act, but I'm not sure about that. I'm just sort of trying to remember that.
Okay. That I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I am going to make the comment. It looks like about $246 or $256 and change between the closest supplier, and whether we could cut staff time in getting the parts needed to cover that over the life of the mower would be the one consideration that I would suggest. Hopefully that is not entering the debate, but providing detail. Councillor Howard.
I think this is a specialized piece of equipment, so if we're going to ask for bids, if we're going to take the lowest bid, and they're comparable, or not get bids. So
Yes.
I see nothing wrong with taking the lowest bid on this.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this? And I have it, can we second it? Are we ready for the decision?
Could we hear the motion again, please?
Richard, please.
That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive the report of the Director of Public Works dated June 18, 2018 regarding the procurement of one roadside mower for information, and further that the purchase of one Vortex Jumbo Frontline 190 roadside mower in the amount of $23,743.52 plus applicable taxes from Coldboy Enterprises 2012 Limited be authorized.
All those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to 6.4.2, municipal development and servicing guidelines. I'll let Sean explain further.
Thank you, Reed Vincent. Basically, there's a couple of recommendations before you that precede the report. Basically, we have Bruce Potter here from BM Ross that has a presentation that would support the recommendations, those being that this report be received, and also that the road cross-sectional design for both urban and suburban developments as presented by BM Ross be adopted as minimum standards for the new development of Huron.
Okay. How do you feel about doing the presentation right now, Bruce?
I'm fine with that, Your Worship. I'm just glad the damn people left. I thought they cleared out because Laura was going to talk. Could that be?
No.
So we've got a couple pending subdivision developments and some questions about the fact that council has never formally adopted any kind of development standards for new standards in the municipality. This is primarily road standards. And I've done presentations like this with a number of municipalities. And without standards, you know, the council's sitting around just wondering what should be going on. And hopefully we can cure this. The Reeve really should turn around and look at this because this isn't in the printed version you got. There's no resemblance. So standards are needed to provide consistent, appropriate development of sites that are building services that ultimately will be owned by the municipality or in some cases privately owned. And if you listen to nothing else I say tonight, this is what I'd like you to listen to right now. You should have standards. They could be A or B or C or D, and then you should apply them consistently. Because if you don't do that, you'll have every single developer here playing let's make a deal, and your hair will get gray, or like mine, it will fall out. So I'm going to talk mostly about roads, but very, very quickly I'm going to talk about stormwater management, storm sewers, grading, water, sanitary, sidewalks, and some other utilities. Throughout time, we've had road standards that are adapted to the transportation methods of the days. And the Romans built roads, so they recognized the need for efficient systems. I always think if you look backwards, then you can look forwards and look for where we come from, where we're going to. And a lot of the Roman roads that still are in use were built wide enough to have chariots meet. And coincidentally, that's about 20 feet, which is a lot of our township roads are. And a lot of the Roman roads were built, according to that cross-section on the left, I can't tell you what some of the Latin means, but damn it looks like a road that we might build today. And a lot of pioneers built corduroy roads because that was expedient. That's what was there. But we're not using a lot of those anymore. The roads have to have a purpose. We have to know what they're being used for. I like this photo of an overpass for the Elk somewhere near Calgary, and that's a separate road that I suspect we won't be needing in North Huron anytime soon. And we have to look at how they will be maintained. This is somewhere near the Reeves house a few weeks ago, I suspect.
Isn't that 21?
Well, I've driven down 21 when it has looked like that a few times. Actually, this is from somewhere in Labrador, you must know, but it's just an example. And you've got to look at their relationship with the environment. And you know, here's a road that's washed out because of a large flood. So if we go back, some of us are old enough to remember that the MTO established road standards for new road design, and up until 1991, they actually provided funding to municipalities to maintain roads on an annual basis. What they did was they set standards for what new roads should look like at that time. And they had three standards. A cottage road, less than 50 vehicles per day, in essence just a little trail down to 3 or 4 cottages. Suburban roads, and they called that anything with frontages greater than 100 feet, or we would say today estate lot type subdivisions, or urban roads where the average frontage was less than 100 feet. And until those subsidies disappeared, if you were going to have a new subdivision in Ontario, it had to meet that standard or they wouldn't give you a subsidy to maintain the new road. But that all disappeared in the early 90s. And since then, the municipalities have had much more freedom to establish those standards. And I can say to you, all of the municipalities we're associated with have established policies that are very similar to those old MTO standards. So what was the cottage road? Well, it's still what they were asking for: a 20-meter right-of-way, a 5.5-meter surface, that's about 17 feet, some shoulders and rural cross-section. And this is a photograph of a road in ACW, I think it's in Ashfield, but I can't remember, that was built to that standard at that time, and now it looks, you know, there are ditches there, but it looks more like just a gravel lane back to a few cottages, but that is a municipal road. The suburban cross-section has ditches and culverts, and you see the cross-section in the bottom right corner, and it could be different widths of surface. There's usually a paved surface. In this photograph in the top, you can see some homeowner in this subdivision has lined his ditch with stone, and he obviously didn't have much to do in his spare time. But anyway, it is rather attractive. Now, a lot of municipalities have had problems with some of these suburban subdivisions. There were a lot of developers that developed subdivisions in the 60s and 70s and the 80s where their average frontage would be 101 feet, and they would use the excuse they could have the suburban cross section, and the homeowners would come in and there'd be a piece of big old pipe and 3 loads of topsoil, and the grass would be cut 4 times before you notice there were drainage problems. So we've worked with a lot of municipalities that have had these kinds of problems, and you can see that as evidenced in these pictures. And that's just a bigger picture of what a suburban cross-section might look like for Central Huron, or for North Huron. On the wrong road today. Urban roads have curb and gutter. They're usually 8.5 meters in width or something similar to that. Storm sewers, an asphalt surface, and then corridors for all the other utilities. And that's a photo of a road that's under construction in a subdivision in Kincardine. There's a lot of advantages. They're clean, they're neat, there's no ditch maintenance. They're what a lot of residents want, and the curb provides an ability to retain the water and direct it, and also to keep the structural edge of your asphalt surface in good shape. And that's what an urban cross-section might look like if you're looking at a drawing. So what are your neighbors doing? I can say all the municipalities we're working for are requiring urban cross-sections in any kind of urban settlement. Here in Kinloss, ACW, and Kincardine require an urban cross-section for all new development, even that along the lakeshore, regardless of frontage. And Colborne and Huron Township have been doing that. Colborne now ACW, and Huron Township now here in Kinloss have been doing that modified urban standard with curb and gutter for close to 30 years because they've had problems with people filling ditches in and having to try and convert them after the fact. So our recommendation going forward would be in all settlement or urban areas that an urban cross-section should be considered for a truly rural estate lot type development. And I would say more than 101 feet frontage, an urban cross or suburban cross-section could be considered and would be very appropriate. So this is what the cross-section for North Huron might look like. It's rather busy. There's corridors for water mains and sanitary sewers and storm sewers and electrical and telecommunications utilities and gas mains, and a corridor with the ability to put a sidewalk on each side of the road. Those were all included in your handout that was attached and a part of your agenda. And for a suburban cross-section, in more of an estate lot type subdivision, this is what that cross-section might look like. I want to talk briefly about some other utilities, storm sewers and stormwater management first. Storm sewers are designed for what we call the minor storm. That's the storm that we expect to be exceeded once every 5 years. And larger events would be handled with overland flow down the roads and to some outlet to a creek or the river. Stormwater management looks at stormwater quantity and stormwater quality. I'm going to be very simple here. Storm discharges are limited to peak flow rates that don't exceed pre-development peaks if you're looking at stormwater quantity. And the quality of stormwater is improved by providing some opportunity for sedimentation. So what does that mean? Well, for stormwater quantity, your pre-development situation might look like a curve that's the solid line there that says, it rains and the flow goes up to a certain level over time. It peters off, and there's 2 rainfalls in this example. But if you did a post-development flow without some sort of controls, you're going to get a much higher peak much earlier on, and that creates problems for your downstream infrastructure. So you draw a line across the top of that. Oh, I have my pointer here. You draw a line across the top of this peak here, and the area under that triangle is how much storage you need if you do the math. So that's why you see stormwater management ponds and things such as that. And they might look like something like what we see on the left there. From a quality point of view, you're really looking at having the first small amount of rain provide for some sedimentation. So in the little pond on the left, there's what we call a forebay, which might be this, or actually it might be that, but you know, a little smaller wet pond where sedimentation can happen and then go into a larger facility. On a smaller development area, you might have what's called an oil grit separator, which again is an opportunity for sedimentation. This is just an example drawing. The top right-hand corner, that would be your quality, and this would be your quantity pond. And there's some photos there of an industrial pond that we did in Stratford, and the grass isn't starting to grow there yet. So there's something called low-impact development, which the Ministry of the Environment and the conservation authorities are asking for some form of lids to be considered as part of new and redeveloped sites. And this is an engine that's getting rolling. I think in the coming years, we'll be talking about this more, and it may have to be part of municipal standards. It's about handling this stormwater more locally, more looking at infiltration. And I think that's all I'll say about it tonight. I don't think it's a topic for what we're considering in this conversation. So grading and drainage. Lot grading, sorry, Gary, any idiot developer can put in roads and infrastructure. Everybody seems to make a mess of lot grading. So when we're working with developers and engineers, we take a very close look at how lots should be graded and how that surface drainage should be handled. So you get drawings such as this, which show where the water is supposed to go, and then you look at how it's to work. And I think it's important, and I always include this in any discussions I have, because guys like the building official and Sean and I wind up going around afterwards scratching our head when this doesn't work out and trying to figure out why there's grading problems. This is just another example. This is on a very steep site, incidentally. You can see all the contours there. And you can see that on this example drawing, there's different types of grading. On the one on the left, you have back to front grading, and you have to shed the water at the rear of the house and shed it around both sides. And on the one on the right, there's grading that's split between the front and the backyards. Sanitary sewers and water mains. In essence, they're done to MOE guidelines and to the Ontario Provincial Standard specifications and drawings. You can enhance those in your documents, but there's really not much to change. Sanitary sewers are designed for two kinds of flow: one from predicted sources, and two, an allowance for extraneous flows, or inflow and infiltration. And as much as we'd like to never have inflow and infiltration, I think we're cognizant of the fact that it's going to exist. And for most sanitary sewers, you'd be looking at something like 30% of the total might be for that. Water distribution flows are for predicted peak demands plus considerations of fire flows. And finally, utilities. It's important to establish corridors for utilities in your right-of-way. And we continue to bury more and more stuff on our right-of-ways every time we speak. And it never fails. You put a new subdivision and some other utility company comes along and wants to bore another line in, and they want to put it in the best place for them, not necessarily the best place for Sean. So I very quickly ran through that, and we've got everything figured out on the board there, and I'm going to answer questions. But I think that staff's concern tonight is to talk about the typical cross sections that should be considered for urban or estate lot suburban type developments, and with the idea that at some time in the future, they would then implement that with a document, a booklet that could be handed out to developers that would provide more information as to how that would be done. So, Your Worship, you may have at me.
Going to Deputy Reeve.
Some of the first pictures you were showing of roads going through, a lot of them only had sidewalks on one side of the street. How do you decide which side?
Oh, I can answer that quite easily.
Okay.
Let me go back. So this is the cross section. You want this or a photo?
No, this is fine.
Okay.
This is fine.
Mr. Ross taught me this. The sidewalk should be on the side of the street closest to the schools. So little Johnny doesn't have to cross the street twice to go to school. And that sounds very simplistic, but when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So in certain subdivisions, roads wiggle all the way around, but that makes some sense. I would suggest to you that most subdivisions we would have in communities this size do not entail the requirement for commercial or institutional type streets where there's schools and stuff. A lot of those streets, you may want sidewalks on both sides. But for local residential streets, all of the municipalities I'm working for are putting sidewalks on one side of the street. So in this typical cross section, it provides a corridor, a space for it on either side. But that's what municipals, the municipalities we're working with, where there was no sidewalk isn't built on that one yet. But that's what municipalities who are working for elsewhere are requesting.
Councilor Vaughn.
I'm glad that Deputy Reeve raised the question of sidewalks because it's kind of beside the issue that we're dealing with. But I think it's a really important one. We have considerations on the go about whether to require sidewalks in a development. I think we should. I think we've been remiss for decades in doing away with sidewalks when we should have. There's an expression that I really believe in, that sidewalks make communities. And I think we've really been remiss, and we need to reconsider that policy for all developments.
Deputy Reeve?
Just a note of interest, my wife said, I told her we're going to be talking about this tonight. She said, just in case you need a sidewalk for your walker, when you get a little older, we need it on one side of the street anyway.
Even in East Walnut.
But you have no sidewalks in East Walnut.
Actually, we do have about 60 feet.
No, in Auburn.
In Belgrave.
There was some. No, there's sidewalks.
Are we done?
Okay.
Any further questions? I just want to make a comment. I think it's a very sensible plan. We should have a policy on these, but including sidewalks.
Okay. So, do we do the motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. If he wants to do it, I'll second.
There you go. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. Okay. 6.6.1, Drainage Superintendent Report on the Riswell Municipal Drain. Kirk?
The report before council tonight is due to a request submitted by Garrett and Marie Huron, landowners of concession 12, parts of part lot 28, part lot 29. And the request is for drainage improvements to the Rintoul Municipal Drain, specifically branches K, F, and I. My recommendation is in front of council tonight. The reason for firm that I'm recommending is they've done work on the Rintoul Drain recently in the last 2 years, so they are familiar with the area. That basically summarizes my report.
Motion.
Deputy Campbell moves and Councillor Hallahan seconds. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. We will wait through Correspondence, 7.1, North Huron Economic Development Committee request regarding marketing. Richard?
Gauri Vincent. So there is a request from the Economic Development Committee has been received for Council's consideration regarding making changes to the terms of reference for the Economic Development Committee to remove all references to marketing and to direct the treasurer to amend the economic development budget and reallocate all marketing dollars to the recreation department.
Councillor Slate.
Councillor Syed?
Yeah, so a lot of the conversation at the Economic Development Committee has been not that they want to not have any input on marketing. They don't want to talk about what advertising or what plan is going to be for the advertising dollars that we're talking about within marketing. They will provide, they're more looking at the big picture when it comes to strategy, which we expect the majority of that being done through the recreation department currently with how we deal with the rec activities and so forth. So I think it's just just adding to their complement to ensure that we have a marketing strategy for the entire municipality and as it looks like. But the day-to-day, what advertising comes here and goes there and what those costs look like, they will bring that information to the Economic Development Board or committee for consideration, not necessarily for approval, but for input on to what that looks like and how we as the Economic Development Committee can impact that structure. So that really is the discussion about marketing. They really didn't want to get into the day-to-day activity of what marketing we're doing, just the overall strategy. And once that strategy is determined, how do we impact that strategy going forward?
Councillor Biden, do you have a
I'm
question?
not clear how that works. Who does the marketing plan and the decisions, and who approves them?
Go ahead.
So currently what the intention would be is right now, the rec department, which is currently, let me remind her name, Denise, thank you. Denise has taken on that part of the role from our past economic development officer because the majority of the marketing was dealt with through the rec department per se with regards to that emblem of the municipality. So part of that is they will in turn develop the strategy that will become to hear council as well as the Economic Development Committee for input on what that strategy looks like. So the council is still going to approve that strategy based on a recommendation from staff, no different than any other requirement that we ask for. It's just that once that strategy is determined, this committee is not going to determine if we're going to put an advertisement in for the fire support or whatever the case may be, or Secretary's Day or whatever else is there. So it is ultimately putting the information into the staff perspective, allowing them to develop the strategy, coming to the community, coming to the committee and council for input and direction, and then they take it from there to succeed on that strategic plan based on what they've got from input from us.
So does that infer that Denise will work through the BIA, the local BIA, or where does she get her data for making marketing decisions?
Councillor Syed.
So that input will be part of the information that she gets via the strategy. So that strategy will go to all the stakeholders, the BIAs, the committee, the Economic Development Committee, and this council for input.
With that explanation, is the remover for this. Councillor Knott,
I'll move.
Deputy Reeve Campbell seconds. Is there any further discussion on it? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, 7.2, Union Gas request for a letter of support for Stratford reinforcement project. If nobody has any comment, we have worked well with Union Gas representatives, and basically that would help support the Union Gas lines that come to Wingham with having the extra support to Stratford and allow for possible further expansion of natural gas in the local area, especially North Huron.
I move approval of this.
Okay, Councillor Wadden, Councillor Allied. Ready for the question? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. 7.3, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority letter regarding impact of Huron Dam on flood risk. Richard?
Gauri. So this is a piece of correspondence received from Steve Jackson, Flood and Erosion Safety Service Coordinator for Maitland Valley. And the motion is to receive that piece of correspondence and direct staff to incorporate that into any further Huron Dam related reports.
Councillor Slate?
I will move it, but I'd like to add something to the staff direction part. And it came up in the comments from the dam committee about what, about the impact of those, Steve's comments about his report, how that truly impacts and what that looked like in the floodplain development. All I would ask that we would incorporate whatever questions that the committee has, that those questions be asked back to Maitland Valley and get responses for those clarification questions about what those look like. Because I think it's important from a information perspective about what the impact of those changes may look like.
You're just asking for full transparency.
That's exactly what I want. I just want to make sure that if the committee has questions about comments or suggestions that we're being going to take into consideration information for, that every answer is provided so that we can make sure we're making the right decision based on transparent information.
Is that any trouble to add to that? Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. 7.4. Basically, this is GM Blue Plan and AJ Holdings Limited for the Rutledge subdivision, Blythe, and possible deviation or not from township standards, and that Sean and Bruce are invited to be part of this discussion.
I'm fine with that. I didn't know I was going to do that. Your worship, just let me get my notes and my glasses out again.
Got to trick you once in a while.
Well, I'm pretty easy to trick by this hour of the evening, I'll tell you that.
Right.
I have GM Blue Plan's letter and I have some notes that I shared with staff. Is it your wish, Sean, that I just go through this email?
Yes, that's.
That would be good.
Excuse me. There were a number of points raised in GM Blue Plan's letter. One was the road width itself, and it's proposed to be 8.5 meters, and they proposed to be moved to 8 meters for the purpose of this development. That's not what the standard is. That's not a big difference. I would suggest to you that I don't like playing let's make a deal, but that's something that we could consider if it was part of a bigger package, perhaps. Road allowances. They're suggesting that maybe the road allowances could be 18 meters. There are certainly developments where road allowances are being made narrower. My experience is every time you make it narrower, you have trouble burying all the spaghetti. I'd rather leave them a little wider and have smaller front yard setbacks. And then I bump horns with the planners when I say that, but because we've had cases where we've had to have easements on the front of the lots to find a place to put services. But I don't think in terms of this particular development, the road allowance is a big issue because there's just one road. He's not going to gain any more significant space from that, and he already has draft plan approval. Road construction. We have a requirement in the implementation document, which you haven't seen yet, talking about subdrains. And we already agreed, based upon their geotechnical report, my voice is starting to go, about the depth of the granular B based upon what their provision is, but yet the report also recommends the installation of subdrains. So I think we would have to have a discussion about that. Curb and gutter, the developer is requesting relief of curb and gutter. And I think he's stating that in a lot of smaller communities, such as Blythe, there's not curb and gutter in all the streets. It's my opinion that we're asking, other municipalities are asking for this in communities like that, like Tiverton and other places where there's development. And that certainly when you do some of your reconstructions in your smaller centers in the urban section, you would be considering curb and gutter too. Sidewalk, I don't generally weigh in on the sidewalk. My personal opinion is they should be there, but I leave it up to the municipalities. And we already heard you talk about it. And then private drain connections for storm sewers. The staff team is still unsure what we want to suggest to council to do in the future, but for the purposes of this development, I think we've agreed that we wouldn't be asking for them, provided there was a condition that the discharges be to the rear yards. So that's the response that is based upon a meeting that I had with the staff team, Your Worship. Did I miss anything, Sean?
No, I don't think so.
Deputy Reeve, just one thing, there's another appendix there, rock grading.
Oh, I forgot about that. We would have to go over that with him.
Okay, because we had some of that here in Wingham, where the landowners filled the swale in.
Oh, yes, and had 4 crops of tomatoes before you discover you have a problem.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, in Wellington North, which is Martha and Mount Forest, and a couple of the townships around it where we do a lot of work, they've had so much trouble that they're requiring catch basins with much more concentrated spacings on the lots every 3rd or 4th lot, which just really seems, what's an appropriate word, Matt? Extreme to me. I think in the case of this subdivision, I think we could come to some arrangement with what they've requested, and I've neglected to include it in my note. But I think there's can be a happy medium between what we were asking for and what they suggested. I think we could sort that out, subject to the rest of these items.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Simon.
Yeah, my only comment is that I think I go back to DM Ross's recommendation, the previous slide, is that we have standards for a reason. We should develop them and we should be consistent. And irregardless of what has been proposed or done in the past, whatever standard we have, once a road or what has been redeveloped, it should come up to the same standard that it would be if it was a brand new division, a subdivision, in my mind. I hear all the time about why certain settlement areas in the municipalities are different than other areas. Why some places have sidewalks, some don't. What is the difference? I can't come to today to understand why 50 years ago or 75 years ago those decisions were made. I can't. But what I can do is I can say, here's the standard, here's what we should be doing going forward, but I understand from a developer's perspective about cost benefit, and understand the comment that was made in the report about making sure that it is a cost benefit function. So really the question is, for me, is do the standards that we provide flexibility for cost benefit and cost benefit to a small development versus a bigger development? And if it isn't, then maybe there may be some discussion there. But I don't want to get into this let's make a deal discussion. I want to have it so that when we provide information to developers, they know exactly where our position is, and they can leave there knowing that this is the position. And unless you have some change of heart, the position is going to be this, and this is what we should have. So that's only my comment, because I believe in standards being transparent, but also being flexible in the fact that we're not all Tivertons and Kincardines and all that other stuff. We have to be flexible for development, but we also have to ensure that we're not picking and choosing which benefits are best for certain areas of settlement.
Councilor Vaughan.
Yeah, I sort of agree with with all of that, but it seems to me that when we're looking at a specific development, we're looking at with shades. We're only looking at this area, and we're trying to decide what's cost beneficial to that area. In addition to that, I think we need an overall municipal policy and standards that deal with some of these general questions about the range of standards that we're willing to accept under specific conditions. But I think if we lose, I use the sidewalk business as an example. If we set a goal that from now on, as we develop even older areas as well as new areas, we're going to give a priority to sidewalks. If that's the decision, I'm just suggesting that. But I think we need the overall standards to maintain and then to apply them as needed to the specific development areas.
Deputy.
I agree with this to a certain degree, but sometimes when we have, I'm thinking of this small block that we're working with in Blythe, that sometimes we maybe have to be flexible a little bit in order to get use out of these smaller areas that we want to go into, or else they never become anything. They just be known as scrub land. They don't get developed because it makes their lot sizes smaller, just all these different things. I think we have to be flexible a little bit on some of these things, just so that we get the job done.
Okay, going to Sean.
Thank you, Reeve. Maybe just a couple of points for consideration in the discussion. We can point to certain areas within our own municipality where maybe this particular standard wasn't adhered to. And, when we look operationally as we move forward and get into full road reconstruction, full infrastructure reconstruction, I can point to particular roads right now where there are no sidewalks. To put sidewalks in after the fact is extremely cost prohibitive, because now you're impacting on not private property, but established property and the road allowance. You're into a whole different set of circumstances. So that's one item to bear in mind, that if it's not done now and it is a requirement later, there's gonna be a bit of a sting associated with it, I think, for the ratepayer as a whole. And the other thing, and Bruce, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my take on this as we discuss cross sections and all these development standards is that they're a minimum standard. So clearly, if you're establishing something in an area that's got heavy use, maybe in a hospital's area or school area or something like that, those standards may change even more, right?
So an example would be, we had a development in Wingham here that was done by the school board. And they built a street and a new school. We asked them for sidewalks on both sides of the street because of the institutional uses in that area. So that's a case where we asked for a road that was to this standard, and we asked for sidewalks on both sides because of the institutional nature of the pedestrian traffic there. And when we're dealing with A2A, I would expect that we would ask for sidewalks on both sides of John Street right out to that next street, whatever it's going to be called. Street B for now or whatever it is.
I will accept Gary adding information to the discussion.
Okay, thanks, Reed. I just wanted to make a couple of points, and the reason this was all brought back to council again, which I appreciate you taking the time to look at. And it's a cost-effective plan. I originally had gotten a quote, and with after all the servicing was done and everything, I got another quote, and it was double the price. So it didn't take long to figure out that if I sold all the lots, and I'd be in the hole, I'd be in the red if I developed it to the servicing standards that initially was set up. So it'd be more like, correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, it'd be more like the urban type of crossroad. So that is kind of why I'm requesting the suburban type of crossroad. I'm encouraged to do this because I'm a small rural guy, and Bruce will talk about Kincardine and Huron Kinloss. Huron Kinloss, I believe you're referring to as the Heritage Heights estates, which are estate lots that go for a sizable amount of money. For example, a 50 by 100 lot in Kincardine right now is listed for $120,000. We'd be fortunate to get half that price in Lyeth. Fortunate. So, like I said, I think within 3 years, if we were able to do this, and I was able, even if I was able to break even with the infrastructure going in, what I really want is, I'm in the retirement home business, is to put a retirement home in there for senior citizens and the multi-unit housing rental units too, which I have. Currently, there's 5 lots allocated for the multi-unit. That's the reason for my request, and I'm conflicted too with the sidewalks because I'm in the business, and in Ripley we have no sidewalks, but it's a small rural spot. Our residents walk on the roadways or the side of the roads, and we've never had an issue. So I appreciate you listening to me, but I just wanted to give you the background for the reason. I'm not. It is money, but I'm just trying to break even at this point.
Deputy Reeve.
My mother-in-law lives on Martha Street in Gauri, Georgia, a elderly residential area. And they do have a sidewalk on one side of the street. And it amazes me how many people, seniors, which is part of now, are out on that sidewalk all the time of the day. Mm-hmm. You see different ones, even if it's only on one side of the road, it is being used. Mm-hmm. And I think some of this, what you're talking building here, you're probably going to have some seniors that just have to get out of the house, kind of thing. You can't run from her all the time. But you just have to get out and we got to be careful. But that's just a comment that I think sidewalk on one side, maybe not for all of it, but for some of it, there should be some.
that maybe I shouldn't be making comments here, but the one thing I'll say, if we're looking at residential and possible a light institutional use, we are talking smaller vehicles. And if there isn't any truck traffic, I'll use that as an example, or large buses going through, there can be certain things done there probably, where I believe the 26-foot road would probably be sufficient for a low volume traffic residential area. It's if there was anything further, I'll say east of your development, that might be a consideration, but I think for low volume traffic and just cars and maybe a certain amount of scooters, if we're talking seniors, that I'm at the stage where I wouldn't be without my gator for getting around, so that.
And I'd just like to point out, this is what's happening in small rural Ontario, is nobody's putting subdivisions in. And it's strictly, unfortunately, it's all, it costs the same to put, maybe pretty much the same to put the infrastructure in, say, even in Kincardine, than it would be to put in Blythe if it was up to the same standards. But you aren't getting the same return on your money for, you're getting half the price of a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for your consideration.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, Gary, you don't expect a decision tonight on this, do you? We're gonna have more discussion on it and get back to you.
Okay,
right?
Is
that fine with you?
That's fine, and I appreciate getting on the agenda tonight, but there is an urgency.
Yes,
again.
I know. We have to do it right away.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sean or Bruce, any further? Okay. There's no motion listed right now. Do any of the councillors have recommendations for Sean to work with, and possibly Dr. Bruce? Is that you would be willing to make a motion to have Sean and Bruce work on something to see if that there can be some compromises made to make it work? Okay, thank you. Callahan and Vauden, if you want to comment. Okay. Question, all in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Moving to 8.1, the Reed's activity report. There's a number of things that I've been involved with, all of which have a gag order until somebody wants it known, such as development and certain things. It's an active time, and there's a number of things that will be shown in our in-camera session with 6 points to discuss, so that I will go to council members for verbal reports of boards or committees we work with. Councilor Vauden.
I have a word that there's going to be a radar speed display mounted in Blythe for the summer, an electronic gizmo that records speeds of people coming through, and the data can be collected and analyzed, and so it'll be great in terms of perhaps reminding people of how fast they're going, and that their speed is shown on the dial. But collectively, over any period of time, the data can be collected to see the general speed habits of people, and then the result of any changes we make in terms of signage or whatever, how does that affect the speeds and so on. So there's quite a bit of analysis that can be done on this, and it's sort of a trial for the county on using this particular design, and they are the cost that I see for this is just over $6,000 for one item, but they'll be looking at applications in various points around the county.
Councillor Site?
Just a question, have they determined where that will be located?
They have identified a number of areas, possible areas to put it, but I can't really say which are the favorite locations at this time. They are movable. They can be moved to other positions if they're not having the proper effect. But they are showing concern for the intersection applied, but it's to the approach to the intersection that is one of the main concerns. Whether that's the one that's going to be treated or not, I don't know.
Okay, that I will maybe add some information that there was a presentation on crosswalks by Julie Sajak gave a presentation to county council, and that while Blythe has no crosswalks, there is 3 other places within the county that are talking about the need, and that the county public works is supposed to be doing a report on a number of things, and especially the number of solar powered units that save from having to have electricity hooked up to them. And while some of the crosswalks have been as much as $350,000 to get them, that the solar powered units, a lot of places that a number of them are coming down to approximately $35,000. So that is something that is ongoing. And my impression is that the speed machine would be positioned at different places, such as the corner of 4 and County Road 25 corner to the north end, and even at Dinsley, where it was suggested that if there was only one crosswalk, that in front of the theater or at Dinsley might be the right location, so that there is flexibility in that program, Councillor Sykes.
So are you saying, Reeve, that county council is looking to use this information from this sign to establish information that could be utilized in that report with regards to the crosswalks? Is that what you're saying?
There is possibility of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, with regard to the crosswalks, there's been a very steep learning curve. They had to make a lot of modifications as time goes by. Difficulties that no one anticipated. One of the difficulties was that they put the arrows pointing the wrong way for pedestrians to go. But a lot of errors were made in plus the height of the lights and the location of the lights and the distance between the stop points and the actual intersection. So they made a lot of changes as time has gone on, and they're learning a lot.
It was a very informative presentation that Julie made, and I think I, along with a number of others on county council, look forward to the department's engineers, coming up with a number of recommendations. A number of them will fit Main Street of Blythe. Is there any other, Councillor Knott?
Oh, this is something that's been coming, and I'm going to, although this hasn't been made official and I haven't done it, I want to take the moment to tell everybody that my resignation from council will be coming forward shortly. This will be my last council meeting. My resignation will be taking effect the end of June, and we are leaving the municipality. But I wanted to take this opportunity just to thank everybody for the support over the past 5 years, and wish everyone well. And hopefully that some of the initiatives that have begun in the last year or two, such as the Economic Development Council and the VIAs, which have been in existence for a couple of years, that they keep moving forward on them, because I think they are critical to the future of the municipality. But I do want to take this opportunity to thank everybody on council and staff as well, those before and those that are left. So it seems like this has been a mass exodus lately. Every time we turn around, we seem to be losing and changing staff and so on. But just for various reasons, it's come down to a situation where we've decided the decision is to move where I spend a lot of time, unfortunately, just too much time away from home. So we will be leaving, and we will miss a lot of the people in the municipality. And I say we wish you luck in the future with everything, and thank everybody again. And that will be coming forward to the Reeve and clerk and so on very shortly. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk longer on that after the meeting's over, probably. Okay. That has us moving to bylaws. Bylaw number 59, 2018. Richard?
That bylaw 59, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the Reeve clerk to sign on behalf of council an agreement between the Township of North Huron and Pitney Bowes of Canada Limited for the lease of a postage machine be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
I'm going to say, should that be tempered or the alternate questioned?
I think you could simply insert the statement that subject to there not being a more affordable alternative available from Canada Post, and then just allow a couple of days to just look into that quickly. If not, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll make the motion with that addendum.
Okay, Councillor Sype seconds. All in favor? Carried. Okay, bylaw number 60, 2018. Richard?
That bylaw 60, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the acceptance of the OPP contract policing proposal for the Wingham Ward of the Corporation of the Township of North Huron, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Vaughan, Councillor Knott. All in favor? Carried. Okay, bylaw number 61, 2018. Richard?
That bylaw 61, 2018, being a bylaw to authorize the Reeve clerk to sign on behalf of council an agreement between the Township of North Huron and TELUS Mobility for municipal cellular devices, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Sype, Deputy Reeve Campbell. All in favor? Carried. Okay. No other announcements. Other business. Okay, point 13, closed session and reporting out. Do I have a motion to go in camera? Councillor Syke, Councillor Hallahan, all in favor? Carried, short recess.